Welcome back to another episode of the Iced Tea Podcast. Today we are interviewing color analyst Tripp Tracy for the Carolina Hurricanes. We talk all about his starting days as a goaltender at Harvard University, as well as his relationship with Coach Rod Brind'Amour and the team, and just how much the Raleigh community means to him.
With Brandon, based on the fact that I saw him passing every unique test with flying colors, is don't limit his ceiling. And Rod's in his zone on the bench. And he said, "You're lucky that we're such close friends. You parked in my spot." It has been very impressive just to get to these three Eastern Conference finals.
Yeah.
Obviously, more than anything, I want the Stanley Cup to return here to Raleigh. I want to see that so badly.
Iced Tea is a production of Mix 101.5 and presented by Lane & Associates Family Dentistry, where every patient is treated like family.
Tripp Tracy, TV analyst for the Carolina Hurricanes for over 20 years, joining us today along with the great Frank, who you might be able to see if you're watching this on YouTube, curled up on the floor there. Thank you so much for joining the Iced Tea Podcast.
Yeah, Meghan, I've watched it, and it's I've thoroughly enjoyed it. You have as well, haven't you, Frank? You know, he has trouble relaxing, but you know, I've listened and watched, or I can't remember if I've watched two. I think both.
But you are always calling other people legends, and I sit here and I'm like, no, sir, you are the true legend here. You're so loved in the Canes community, and you just brought up college. So we're going to take it back, Mr. Tripp Tracy, right to the beginning. Goalie at Harvard University.
Long before you were born, you legend.
The great Frank's looking at his dad like, Harvard dad? Goalie? So how did that become?
Well, I guess the bullet point story would be that I was playing AAA hockey when I was 13 or 14, whenever I was starting high school, what would have been my 8th grade year, I think the junior Hurricanes are probably involved in the famous Quebec Pee Wee hockey tournament right about now.
Yeah.
And I know Shane Willis, the exceptional job that he does on every front, fathomable. That he's going to be there. And I played in that tournament twice. I remember one of the times I played in the tournament, because you miss a lot of school, my science teacher, her name was Mrs. Renault, because I was going to miss school. She said, "You have to do extra credit," because I was going to be up in Quebec City building with a French-Canadian family, which was an awesome experience. And I said, "Well, what do you have in mind, Mrs. Renault?" And she said, "You have to dissect a chicken from scratch and put it back together in skeletal form." And I dug in, and I mean, I got the chicken right with the feathers, and took care of everything. And all these decades later, I was just at Rod Brind'Amour's house. He and his wife Amy had me over to dinner quite often, and anybody that knows me knows that I still, all these decades later, can't consume chicken on the bone because of that experience. And Chester the chicken, that's what it was called, the skeleton, was on display at my middle school. Anyways, that's a bit of a tangent story, but a good one.
Yeah.
And so my parents suggested that because prep school was academically really good and the hockey was good, that I look at prep school in the East. And I settled on a school called Milton Academy my freshman year in high school, which is very good now, but great academic school. Our team just wasn't really good. And I tried to transfer to another school called Belmont Hill, and that got kiboshed by my future athletic director, a true legend, and a dear, dear friend, Bill Cleary, who was the coach when Harvard won the national championship in 1989. And I actually I got invited to go to the Beanpot my freshman year in high school. I had no idea what the Beanpot was. Remember, we had a game against a high school called St. Sebastian's that day, and I had been asked to go to the Beanpot, and I went, and Harvard beat Boston University, and they on the road to winning the national championship that year. And I also noticed that they had 2 freshman goalies, and I was a freshman in high school. So I knew that,
you were doing the math.
I knew there'd be a good chance there'd be a real opportunity to not only go to Harvard, but to play right away.
Okay, a couple of things. first of all, digging in, did you get that from you having to dig into this dang chicken? Is that where the dig in came from?
No, the digging in came from, I used to, Rod's my closest friend in the organization, years ago. I mean, I have a job to do. He has a job to do. But, I mean, I do genuinely believe that there should be 2 statues of Rod Brind'Amour with what he means to the Hurricanes in front of the arena.
Mm-hmm.
One is a Stanley Cup winning captain. It's no doubt there have been some phenomenal trades in Hurricanes history, but that's the best one. And, the fact that, I long before he became the head coach, and I've told this story before, when he was the assistant coach, there was a pregame meal in Arizona, and I was just hanging out. I don't do the meal, that's for the players, but I do some homework then, have some hot stoves with the guys, and so I was hanging out like near where the meal was at, and I remember Jordan Staal walked by, and Rod was in the distance, and Jordan Staal said, that's the guy that should be our coach, and that's a really neat story to think about. And he was exactly right. I always felt that Rod would flourish as a head coach, and I think he should have a statue. Hopefully the Hurricanes get over the hump, and nobody wants to bring the Stanley Cup back here than their Stanley Cup winning captain that is now their coach. But they invest so much, Rod and his coaching staff. I'm close with the entire staff. I think they've done an exceptional job this year with all the injuries.
Yeah.
But the one time that they've done all their work and they could use a little humor is when I walk through the locker room right before my bench interview. And I'll sometimes walk in there and crack a joke, or I'll carve one of them. I won't go into names, but, I would tell them, they'd say, who's your bench interview tonight? And I'd say so-and-so. And, if it was a guy that needed to dig in,
Mm-hmm.
I would say, hey, I'm going to tell him at the end of the interview when I wish him luck, you better dig in tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the origin
I love that.
Of why digging in was called digging in.
It's so perfect and amazing. I love it. And it's just so catchy too. But I want to go back to the bean pot because, a lot of hockey fans know what it is, but I, being from New England, know how prestigious that winning the bean pot is. Northeastern, Boston University, Boston College, and Harvard all go head to head at TD Garden, and they, battle it out. I went to Emerson College in Boston, so very familiar, but you won the bean pot in 1993. Now, what a full circle moment that must have been for you, not only attending the bean pot as a freshman saying, hey, I want to be there in between the pipes. Now you are, as a junior or senior, you
Freshman.
won the as a freshman,
Yeah.
you won the bean pot.
Yeah.
Oh my, and playing along, correct me if I'm wrong, Ted Drury?
He was my captain. And he just went into, in the last couple of weeks, so deserving, into the Beanpot Hall of Fame. And so that's where, things came together, and, the origin of a lifelong friendship. And then, of course, here in Carolina, how special it was for me when Jack was a Hurricane.
Yes. Witnessing his first career goal in the NHL.
Well, actually, his first goal in the NHL, I want to say, was against Detroit. And I know that our director on television did a great job, maybe right before the replays to break down the goal. They showed Ted and Liz, his parents, my dear friends, in the stands. And I was emotional when I was breaking down the goal because of how close I am. Yeah. And I met Jack when he was a couple of days old, when Ted was playing for the Islanders and the Hurricanes were there for a game. But that Beanpot win was extremely special.
Iced Tea is presented by Lane & Associates Family Dentistry. The team at Lane makes every visit an adventure for the kids, whether it's a cleaning, ongoing care, or a special treatment. It's always stress-free for the kids. So visit lanedds.com to find a location near you.
I think the goaltender, I know the goaltender position is so special, and it requires so much more than just physicality. It's such a mental position as well. And we have 2 fantastic tandem goalies for us right now. But I want to talk about Brandon Bussi for a second, hot off his 3-year extension. What, with his story from a goaltender's perspective, can you see from this kid and his talent and what he's going to bring to Carolina?
Well, he wants the moment, and he believes in himself in the moment. And his life experience, we all, I think, strive to somehow achieve humility. But I can only speak for myself. I'm a human being. I believe one of the best acronyms for ego, the best, is edging God out. And I try to be in the ego smashing business every day. But Brandon, is pretty darn close to humility. Mm-hmm. And I just think about, I didn't know him at all, but his first NHL start in San Jose, I got word that he was going to start. And, like I said, when Jordan Staal said what he did earlier about Rod Brind'Amour would be a great coach, the guys, they're so well taken care of. A+, there's a breakfast in the morning. Mm-hmm. And so I got word that he was going to start. And I don't even know that I had introduced myself to him yet. But I wanted to do some background because your family's coming for your first NHL start. Who was coming, learn a little bit more about Brandon. And, that's at 9:30 the morning that he'll end up playing his first game against the San Jose Sharks. And he was totally at ease. Mm. And I found that to be very impressive, very encouraging. I know it made a definite impression with me. At some point, probably during my time at Harvard, fear crept into my game. Mm. And I went from being a guy that wanted to be the guy to make this big save in the big moment to I feared that moment. And, I didn't want to give up a soft goal when it mattered most. Mm-hmm. And Brandon Bussi has that self-belief, period. That's the first thing. So you have all the emotion that goes into the journey and the sacrifice because, the first game in a lot of ways is more about your parents and your family that have sacrificed so much than mm-hmm. the actual player, in my opinion, because all that is sacrifice to even, have the rare percentage opportunity to play in the NHL. He passed that test with flying colors because San Jose was the better team. Certainly in the first period, maybe in the first half of the game, it ended up being a decisive win, mm-hmm. but he was great. So, my strong mindset has been right from the get-go because, we've seen what happens with players when too much expectation is thrust upon them, mm-hmm. whether it be because they're a high first-round pick, whether it's because they've signed, a big-time lucrative contract. Sure. And just as, too much expectation can be a dangerous thing, my message was from the early going with Brandon, based on the fact that I saw him passing every unique test with flying colors, is don't limit his ceiling. Be willing to raise his ceiling, mm-hmm. If he continues to perform and show that it should be raised. At the very least, waiver wire acquisition, he had already been a fine, but who knows what that ceiling could be, and that was really a message that I felt very strongly about in my seat as the color analyst, going back to probably once we got into November.
Yeah, Tripp, I'm listening to all of this, and what's just fascinating me, do you have a photographic memory? You remember even going back to the West Coast. I mean, I know you lived it, but I'm like listening to your facts, like, oh yeah, that did happen. That did happen. That did happen. You're so good. You remember everything.
Well, there's, listen, I'm looking at Frank now after a 10-mile walk this morning. He's a constant reminder for me, named after Sinatra, that my way, my will wasn't working. And so, when we do these walks, I list all of my defects of character and I ask God to remove them. And so I've got plenty of defects, but I have been blessed. I hope that it always stays this way, that I do have a real elephant-like memory. The only person that can really challenge that and usurp it, and we have had some phenomenal, very passionate conversations, is Jacob Slavin. Slaves and I will have them usually on the bus once or twice a year. His memory, if you think mine's good, his memory is ridiculously good.
Really?
Jacob Slavin we know what kind of player he is.
Yeah.
The best defensive defenseman in the NHL, in my view. But behind the scenes, Jacob Slavin has been and is a wonderful friend. And so we have, and this is the case, I've been afforded the opportunity in Carolina for approaching 30 years now that, I have a job to do, but no other color analyst in my estimation in the league is able to have the access that I do with the players. And then I'm in the trenches with them.
Right.
They know I have a job to do, but I'm going to do it with their best interests in mind. You can be objective and still be positive in being objective. I got that advice from John Davidson, as good of a color analyst as there's been in the league, my first year doing TV in 1998. But Slaves, he's got bigger fish to fry because he's getting ready as we tape this to take on Sweden in the quarterfinals in a couple hours.
That's right.
But Slaves, if there's, I need to make sure my recall and my memory is beyond A+, because
it is.
The mental genius that Slaves remembers absolutely everything.
That's amazing. And one moment, I guess, that if you can bring me back there, that I want to live through your eyes is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were commentating during the 2006 Stanley Cup win, yes?
Yeah.
Tripp, walk me through that. Paint me that picture. What was that moment like?
Really, when I think about the Stanley Cup run, I think about a couple of different things. The first round, Montreal was very good. I had a lot of respect for that team. Gerber was sick. Things didn't go well in the first two games. And Montreal won the first one. Yeah, he deserved to win. The second one, Carolina was starting to build, but I think Michael Ryder, good Maritimer, a good guy, scored in overtime. And, like much has been spoken about Lavy bringing Rod into the office and, the decision to go to Cam in Game 3. Game 3, Montreal was all over the Hurricanes. The Hurricanes got every call in the book. You're not generating anything down 1-0 in the third period. And, Brad Hedican just sent a puck across the ice, and Rod just willed a puck into the net. I think it went off of Craig Rivet's stick, Montreal defenseman, and beat Cristobal Huet between the legs. Huet was on fire at that point. I personally think that's the most important goal in Hurricanes history, to tie it at 1. And then you got another power play in overtime, and Eric Staal cashed. Mm-hmm. And Eric Staal was an unbelievable story that year. And then my favorite story of the Stanley Cup final was actually in Game 1. I had to do an interview because it's national television at that point. I had to do an interview before Game 1 with Hockey Night in Canada or something. So I got to the building early, and, I just parked wherever I figured I'd park. And the setup that year was, I think players had availability with the media a couple hours before the game. But I walked out because the Hurricanes have always, given me phenomenal access. I was on the bench, maybe a 7 o'clock game at around 5, and Rod's in his zone on the bench. I mean, he looks like a velociraptor. He's so, if you just look at his eyes. And he comes up to me on the bench, and he's, taping his sticks he's just in the zone. Mm-hmm. The Stanley Cup had been elusive to him. I think it was his third or fourth Stanley Cup final. And he said, "You're lucky that we're such close friends. You parked in my spot." And I'm like, oh, damn it. And then in the second period, Edmonton, got in front of it. I think Edmonton was up 3 or 4 to 1. They were up by a couple of goals, that's for sure. Uh-huh. And superstition is it means everything to so many hockey players. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Rod, we've become so close.
Yeah.
This is probably his last crack at winning the Stanley Cup, and I parked in his spot. And because Edmonton they got it all going in the first game, and I was the happiest guy in the building when the Hurricanes came back. Dwayne Rollison, Edmonton's goaltender, who was playing at a Conn Smythe level, got hurt, and Ty Conklin ended up coming in. There was a collision behind the net, and Rod scored the game-winning goal in Game 1. That I was the happiest and most relieved guy in the building.
It's not me. It wasn't because I parked in his spot.
Yeah. So that's the other thing. I think about the final. in Game 7, after Aaron Ward scored the first goal in the first period, I was sitting with Greg Steffen in the press box, and I was so excited I kicked a hole in the wall.
Oh.
Yeah, and that was because the first goal was going to be everything. If you're on home ice, the huge Caniacs, unprecedented, stood up the whole game.
Yeah,
and
but you stand, don't you? You don't really sit.
I
when
do.
You commentate.
I do a little bit of. I'll sometimes sit. I'll sometimes stand, and I remember after the game, I was just going to go home, and it was Glenn Wesley in particular, and then a bunch of the other players, Rod included, that I was walking out with John Forsland at the time, and they gave us no choice but to go in the locker room. And we're like, no, this is your time, guys. And they're like, no, you guys are coming in here. And, but the team, there was a big party up in the suite level after, but pretty much everybody got bounced from the dressing room except, the players and staff. And that's what I'll remember most because, it's Rod's down there dancing, it's everybody's going nuts. But then it got quiet for a second, and Glenn Wesley, with the Stanley Cup right in front of him, delivered some of the most special remarks that I've ever heard. And he said, that because of what we've accomplished, we will walk together as brothers. It can be 20 years from now, which was just proven. And this will tie us together in the most special way for the rest of our lives. And I'll never forget that after Game 7 in the locker room, because it got quiet, and again, Glenn had played the most playoff games in the NHL at that point without winning, and he had just won. So
wow.
that I won't forget. The privilege, even though I didn't think it was my place to be there, but being in the locker room and witnessing that.
How special. But it says something too, because you've also been a part of this team for this time too, all this time too. And what made you want to stay in Carolina? Is this feel home? Because I know in the broadcast world, there's a lot of shifting. There's a lot of us going to different places and all that. I've moved myself like 4 times. But I love that you've been with this team for so long. Is that a choice? Is this home?
Oh, absolutely. And, there's a lot that goes into that. I absolutely, indescribably, I love the Carolina Hurricanes. I also, back in 2022, the Hurricanes, the fan base, they didn't have to support me like they did. And, the Hurricanes, Tom Dundon, Don Waddell, Rod Brind'Amour, I'm sure dug into the ends of the earth. After I missed the game in New York, I watched what was the last regular season games. I saw it made me very emotional. I saw the signs in the stands, dig in, Tripp, we've got your back. And, I didn't think that my love for the organization could, get any higher, but it certainly did, in spades. I would never want to be anywhere else because, one, my love for the Hurricanes, the fact that no other color analyst in the league has the ability to be in the trenches with the guys, that they know I have a job to do, but, I'm in the trenches with them. Say there was an opportunity to be elsewhere. Why on earth would I ever give away this connection that I have with the Hurricanes fan base approaching 3 decades?
Right.
That's priceless. That's priceless. In particular, when at a fork in the road, the team stood behind me and the fans to the ends of the earth stood behind me. Why on earth would I ever give that away? No chance.
I've only been with the Carolina Hurricanes for 5 years, and I think what I've quickly learned about this organization, and you just said it so beautifully, is that we have something very special in Carolina. We are family. And, people have you in their living rooms when they're not at the game. They're watching you. You're the family. You're part of the family. So of course we we all have each other, and that's what's so great about this community.
Iced Tea is presented by Lane and Associates Family Dentistry. Now, Lane is not just a single office. They have offices all over North Carolina with 50 locations spreading across the state. Visit lanedds.com to find a location near you.
We are going to do our final segment, which is called Spill the Tea, and it's just fun questions. So answer to the best of your ability. I know, yes. Let's take a drink. How you doing, Frank? You doing good? Okay. You just keep napping there, bud. Okay. All right, here we go. Spill the tea. Is it true that you eat Taco Bell or fast food before or after broadcast?
I do not eat before the game.
Okay, same. I cannot. I just don't want to risk it for the biscuit, you know? Things.
I before the game, it's probably, the old line, that you should metabolically have breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. I do the exact opposite.
Same.
Because I want to be able to look forward to my dinner.
I do that too.
Which is after the game. I enjoy Taco Bell very, very much. I've obviously had a ton of fun with my Taco Bell takes over the years. Corporately, for a while, they made an erroneous decision that they dropped the Mexican pizza. They eventually brought that back.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, erroneous corporate decision that they as far as I know, they've never brought back the beef Mexi Melt. Maybe they've got it on the menu named something different. But the reason the Mexi Melt was so good is if you went through the drive-thru, Taco Bell's too messy to eat in your car.
That's fair.
It's going to be all over your car. So you need something, especially if you haven't eaten all day like me, after a game, you need something that is going to get the job done when you're driving home between the drive-thru and then being able to really dig in when you get home.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Listen, we need to get you on the board at Taco Bell because I think some serious changes need to be made. Okay, where do you come up with your Trippisms? Everyone loves cooking with oil, gas, and gravy. Where do you come up with these?
Well, oil, gas, and gravy that I try to make sure that I don't ever overdo things. So I don't know that I've used that maybe once so far this regular.
Really? But we love it.
No,
I'll
wait for what I believe is a big moment.
Got it.
I think I used it. I never ever have something pre-planned in my head. Trippisms, I think very, very few huge caniacs would ever be able to figure out who was the first huge caniac that I ever mentioned.
Can you spill the tea? Who was it?
Yeah, it was during the 10 years without the playoffs, and I have no idea why I even used the term huge caniac at the time. Jacques Cousteau.
Okay.
And I said, he's a huge caniac. He never misses a game.
I know you're a very sentimental person, with memories and everything. Is there a piece of memorabilia that you have that either, was a part of your hockey days or something you've received that you just keep that's important to you?
I have some very special sticks, and I always tell the guys, write what you want on the blade.
Oh.
And, what some of these true legends have written on the blades are very, very, very meaningful to me. And then I still have when the Hurricanes won the Cup, so those blades, what the players have written on the blades is extremely special.
Of course.
And then I have when the Hurricanes won the Cup and the team, I never would have expected this, but the team, let me know that I was going to get the Cup for a day and a night, and I was in Michigan.
Oh, wow.
And I knew I was going to get it, and when, again, it's been a reoccurring theme in this hot stove with you, Meghan, when you play travel hockey, life and sacrifice for your entire family changes. Mm-hmm. Holidays, you aren't going anywhere. You're going to a hockey tournament.
Yeah.
My sister, greatest sister in the world, she ended up playing hockey for a while herself, but, everybody's life totally changes. And when I made the AAA team when I was like 8 or 9, we had a vote, between me and my mom and dad to see if they were going to let me play travel hockey. But when I knew I was getting the Stanley Cup, I think I got it in late August, I asked my dad just covertly. I didn't tell him why I was asking him, but I said, Dad, what was the year that you, Mom, and I had that vote if I could play travel hockey? And the reason that I asked him was because my dad was a huge wine collector, had a huge collection of wine when he was alive. And, he sat there, he had no idea why I was asking, and he said, I think that was 1982. And I'm like, and I didn't tell him, but of course it was, Dad, because 1982 just happens to maybe be the best vintage in the history of Bordeaux in France. And so my mom and dad, because of that vote, when I had the Stanley Cup, drank a 1982 very nice bottle of wine from Bordeaux, signed by the entire Stanley Cup champion team, out of the Stanley Cup.
That's very cool.
And I still, empty of course, but I still have that bottle.
Yeah.
And that's probably as special as it gets.
That is so sweet. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. What's the most exciting thing? I mean, I think I know your answer, but what's the most exciting thing that can happen to this team and you this season?
It's so hard to win. And, I do hope that, I think it is absolutely awesome, Meghan, that the fan base that genuinely impacts whether or not you get 2 points in the standings with regularity. And that isn't, me trying to win points with all of the amazing, huge Caniacs. It's fact. Because I was here for the 10 years without the playoffs. I was here for the feast or famine, when you weren't going to the final in 2002, winning it in 2006, going to the Eastern Conference final in 2009. I was here for all those lean years when you'd get back from the road and, it'd be a half-empty building.
Right,
and it just is extraordinary for me that, we could be coming, like off the road where it's tough for players, especially the guys with families. And maybe you're playing, against a team that doesn't have the draw on a Tuesday night or a Monday night, and the place is jammed.
Right.
And it's energetic.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the level of expectation is higher than it's ever been, which is an exceptional thing. With that being said, it is so hard to win.
It is.
You need, I think for me, the last Stanley Cup winning team that hasn't had a significant injury to one of their core star players. It's been since, right around just after 2000, where I think Colorado won and Peter Forsberg had a lacerated spleen. So luck with regards to health is a huge part of it. Obviously, more than anything, I want the Stanley Cup to return here to Raleigh. It has been very impressive just to get to these 3 Eastern Conference finals.
Yeah.
Okay? That is obviously not the desire. The desire, and what do I want more than anything? I want it for the players. I want it for the fans. And I know that, if Rod were to be, a captain and a coach that's brought the Stanley Cup to Raleigh, the first thing Rod would do is say it's all about the players that he coaches. I want to see that so badly. I want to see it because in a different way, different type of player, both elite people. Jordan Staal has meant just as much to the Carolina Hurricanes as Eric Staal meant to the Carolina Hurricanes. Yes. I think about, these last few years when, Brent Burns, who's a close friend of mine, as elusive as the Cup has been, I wanted to see that, I wanted to see a lift for him. Taylor Hall has been a great Hurricane. Now I want to see, the Taylor Halls of the world. These guys, and it's especially on the plane, that when I say they keep me young, there is not one bad guy in that group. There just isn't. They all, and it's so much fun because, oftentimes when you really know you have special friendships, it's when you carve each other. And once we get our airborne, I'll go up and carve those fools, and it's so much fun. And it's a wonderful. There is truly, and this is not lip service, there's not one slouch in that group when it comes to what kind of people they are. And I want to see them win so badly. And the Carolina Hurricanes have become, in every way, part of the fabric of the community.
Tripp, thank you. Cheers. And I appreciate you being on the Iced Tea Podcast.
I loved it. Thank you, Meghan.
As I knock over my lemon.
As my mom says, when you cheers and you sip, you did. You got to look them right in the eye.
Okay, good. I was distracted by my lemon, but yes.
There's some microphones here in harm's way. But, when you cheers someone, and you take the sip,
yes,
look them right in the eye.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. Look at him. He's just so tuckered out.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of the Iced Tea Podcast. And thank you to our presenting sponsor, Lane & Associates Family Dentistry. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and share this podcast with someone you know.